What's up, everybody? Eric Messersmith here on the Everybody Settle Down YouTube channel. This is ESD today for February 10th, 2026. I wanted to run down a couple of things today that I think are interesting this week. And then yesterday, I posted a video about Bad Bunny and immigration, got a few responses, so I'll read those at the end. Two votes in the Congress that I think are very interesting this week, one in the House, one in the Senate. The House vote is supposed to be today on February 10th at late in the evening. I think it's 8:30 Eastern, but it might be later than that. And this is a vote on the rule to set up debate for some bills they want to try to pass this week. But the reason it's really important is because one of the things tucked into that rule that Republican leadership is trying to get through the House is a ban on any vote to repeal any of Trump's tariffs until August. So last year, they were kind of embarrassed because in the Senate, there were some votes that went against Trump on the tariffs that he's implemented on an emergency basis. And I use that in parentheses, more on that in a second. And they lost some of those votes. And so in the House, they put in a resolution that essentially said, you can't even bring it up for a vote to disapprove of Trump's tariffs through January. Well, that's expired now. And there are a bunch of Republicans who know that these tariffs are not a good idea, especially the way they're being done, and want to vote against them. But the leadership doesn't want to embarrass Trump and doesn't want to have any tough votes for its members. So they're trying to get this ban, and if the rule passes, they will get a ban on even bringing the vote up all the way through January, or through August, I should say. If you remember, these tariffs were supposed to be for emergencies. Congress passed a law essentially saying the president could do certain things in emergencies, but it never mentioned the word tariffs. So Trump has taken that kind of vague language and he has essentially said anything's an emergency. So he says fentanyl coming in from Canada is an emergency that justifies him implementing a huge tariff on Canada. And that's been challenged by the Supreme Court, his use of this law. I think it's pretty likely he's going to lose that case. The Supreme Court's already heard the arguments. They're going to make an announcement on a decision sometime between now and the end of their term in June. I think it's likely Trump loses. But in the meantime, these tariffs are still in effect. And there might be another way he can find to do them in the law. But at the very least, Congress should weigh in on this stuff. Remember, I say this often, Congress is the Article 1 branch of the Constitution. They are first. And they clearly, if you read the Constitution, it's clear the Founding Fathers wanted them to have a role in setting tariff policy. And the fact that the House, the Republican leadership, has just basically said, we're going to give away our power to Trump, even though probably he's not even using it the right way, is, first of all, it's cowardly. Secondly, it's just a terrible abdication of their duty as the Article 1 branch of government. And a couple, my number of the day, I like to bring in some numbers each day, is 8. That is how many months in a row we have lost jobs in the manufacturing sector in America. 8 months, dating back to last April. If you recall, one of, if not the big justification for these massive tariffs that the Trump administration has implemented over the last year was to bring manufacturing back to America, to make foreign products expensive and make manufacturing more appealing in America. Look, maybe it will work at some point in the future, but the evidence is pretty clear it hasn't worked. At the same time, we know prices on goods have remained high. Inflation on goods has remained well above 2%. And you have seen the American consumer, the American businesses and American customers paying the vast, vast majority of these tariffs, which is to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars a year. And so, of course, Congress should step in and say, wait a minute. Almost all the Democrats don't think it's a good idea. Many Republicans don't either. If they could just vote their conscience without any repercussions from Trump, the House and Senate would overwhelmingly vote to repeal most of these tariffs, to take back their power, which they should have, along with the president, to set tariff rates. But of course they don't, and we know why. Politics. But here's the number to watch. In the House, right now, there are a couple of vacancies. So there are 218 Republicans, 214 Democrats. Thomas Massie is a Republican from Kentucky. I don't agree with him on everything, but I respect him because he is a man of principle, and he stands for what he believes in, and he doesn't care about pissing Trump off which is why Trump has supported a primary challenger to him. So Massey is going to vote most likely against this because he doesn't like the tariffs either, which means it's going to be 217 to 215 if everybody shows up and votes. Republicans cannot lose any other votes. If they lose one more vote, it would be 216, 216, which would be a tie, and a tie fails in the House. So they will need every other Republican besides Massey to show up and vote. And there are already a few others, Don Bacon of Nebraska, Kevin Kiley from California, who have said they will not support this either. So if that holds, and I hope it does, they are going to force the House to take that provision out of the roll and allow a vote on the tariffs. Now, remember, even if the vote passed to overturn the tariffs in the House and the Senate, Trump would veto it and there wouldn't be enough support to override his veto. But it would be a symbolic way, at least, of the majority in both the House and Senate saying, hey, wait a minute, whether you think these tariffs are a good idea or not, and I don't personally, but even if you do, it's how they're done that is important. And Congress should have a role in setting trade policy for the United States of America. That's not a crazy idea. That's how it's been done up until this last year throughout American history. Okay, the Senate vote we're watching for, I'll talk more about this later, but the Senate vote is to fund the Department of Homeland Security. So if you recall, there was a big government shutdown in the fall, 43 days, I think it was, the longest ever. There was a shorter one a week or so ago for 4 days. And now they've agreed to fund the government all the way through the end of September, the end of the fiscal year, except for the Department of Homeland Security, which includes, of course, ICE and Customs and Border Enforcement, which is where the issue is. The DHS the DHS is funded through midnight Friday on a short-term basis. If they don't pass another short-term funding bill or get a deal on how to reform ICE, then the Department of Homeland Security would shut down. And that includes not just ICE and Customs and Border Protection, but it includes things like FEMA, the Coast Guard, TSA. So there's a lot at stake, even with just that one department. Democrats have said they will agree to fund the Department of Homeland Security, but only if they get some changes to the way ICE does its business. And we saw this in the wake of the killings of Freddie and Good in Minneapolis and some of the heavy-handed tactics that ICE and Customs and Border Protection have used there. And the Democrats are trying to use their leverage on this DHS funding bill to get some reforms. And there has been some negotiations back and forth between Democrats and the White House. So we'll see if they can come up with something. I've said before, I don't like shutdowns, but I think on rare occasions, if the issue is important enough and you think you actually can get a win, get a result, I think it is worth using your leverage to try to get some changes. And I think this is a smart spot to use it for Democrats. If you look at all the polling, the public is with them. I've seen polling recently that there is now a majority of support to defund ICE, which is crazy because a year ago, that was a radical position. That was a position that got Democrats in a lot of trouble when they started talking about it during the 2020 primaries on the Democrat side, because most Americans thought, we need ICE. We need some type of enforcement, a domestic enforcement organization for deportations and to help control illegal immigration. But because of the way that ICE has been implementing their policies, along with Customs and Border Protection, the masks, the unmarked vehicles, the roving patrols, the detaining people, sometimes even American citizens, the killings I mentioned in Minneapolis, the fact that now in thousands of cases across the country, courts have ruled that ICE has improperly detained people. That has happened literally thousands of times during this last year. So Republicans have lost their big margin on the issue of immigration deportations I talked about yesterday. So that vote will happen later in the week. The math there in the Senate, right now it's 53-47 Republican, which means you need at least 7 Democrats to get to 60 votes. In the Senate, you need 60 votes to avoid a filibuster. So most likely Republicans will lose probably Rand Paul, who, like Thomas Massey in the House, doesn't usually vote for these kind of funding bills. So you probably will need 8 Democrats to vote to fund the Department of Homeland Security past midnight Friday if they can't agree to a deal on some reforms to ICE. So that's something to watch. Couple of comments from the video I did yesterday talking about immigration and Bad Bunny's performance at the Super Bowl. And if you didn't see it, the main point I was trying to make yesterday was that CBS News got a hold of internal documents from the Department of Homeland Security. And it's the first time we've ever seen the real internal numbers from the agency. And what it found was for this first year of the Trump administration, they've arrested ICE and Customs and Border Protection about 400,000 illegal immigrants. 14% of them had either been convicted of or charged with a violent crime, including murder, sexual assault, things like that. 14%. 2% of them were gang members. 2% of the people they've arrested, I think it was 0.5%, had either been convicted or charged with murder. So it kind of undermined this whole worst of the worst narrative you hear. A couple of comments on my video yesterday. Han Vega 3069 said, "This is the best take I've seen on immigration." Well, thank you. Appreciate that. Ace Rob ME9SS comes in with a comment of "Great job, and I agree with what you said." Appreciate you, Ace. One other one, this one not so good. The Super Psycho Killer, that's kind of a scary name, said, "No way, start the right way, not fair for those who followed the rules." Look, I respect that argument. I respect people who just come out and say, "I want to deport every single illegal immigrant no matter what." I don't agree with that. I would just say, in terms of following the rules are very complicated. They've changed a lot over the years. It's very, very hard for anybody to get to this. The idea that if you just do things the right way, you can get to America, that's not really borne out by the facts. Unless you are married to an American citizen or you have strong family ties, like lots of family members in America, or you are lucky enough to be one of the skilled workers in like the H-1B visa program, or you win a lottery, visa lottery, it is very, very difficult to get to America. And the vast majority of people who try the legal way will never make it. Now, does that justify illegal immigration? I'm not saying that. I'm saying to just say, well, do it the easy way and the legal way isn't really realistic for most people. You also have to consider the desperation that so many people are feeling. And so many of us, if we were in that same situation, we would do whatever we had to do in order to make life better for our loved ones. And that's what so many of these people did. So many of them. Also, you have to factor in that in America, we needed this labor from illegal immigrants. It has helped our economy tremendously. The Cato Institute just came out with a study that looked at the last 30 years of immigration. And it found that immigration contributed way more in tax dollars over that time than was spent on services. And that was true for both legal and illegal immigration. And it was a net of trillions of dollars contributed to the tax base and over what was spent on public services for those immigrants. Now, does that mean unchecked immigration is a great thing? Of course not. There are always trade-offs in everything. Somebody once said, one of my favorite quotes is, "There are no solutions, only trade-offs." I think it was Thomas Sowell. And that's so true in immigration. There are going to be things in it. Like, for instance, having mass immigration drives up costs of certain things, including housing. That takes away some jobs, particularly at the low end for native-born Americans. So I'm not saying immigration is entirely positive. I'm saying it has been a big net positive for this country over the last 30 years. And we let's be honest, politicians, big business, it was kind of a wink and a nod. And we needed the labor and we kind of looked the other way. And I admit that got out of hand. And it got out of hand during the Biden administration, especially when we had millions of people in a given year coming across the border and being released into the interior of the country. I don't support that. I'm glad that we do have control over the border now. But I think it's disingenuous to say that, well, if people just did it the right way, everyone would be taken care of and everything would be fair. And I think that doesn't speak to the complexities of the world as it exists now and has existed certainly over the last 30 years. But anyway, appreciate the comment from everybody. If you have any comments on today's video, make sure you leave them. I'll try to respond to those in a future show. This is the Everybody Settle Down YouTube channel. Thanks so much for being with us. Have a great night.